On the front pages today, let's take a look at the Sunday Times. Let's start with that. The story you just heard about in the news there, top Tory in new Lobbygate row, the allegations that he coached a client before a committee grilling. Also on the front page of the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister telling internet giants to tackle porn, the availability of porn online. Scotland on Sunday this morning, teachers' fear of touching harms pupils. This is the Children's Commissioner in Scotland claiming that touching children is fundamental to their development and that the pendulum of safety has swung too far. Lots, of course, of pictures of Mandela on the front of the papers today and inside. The Sunday Telegraph, their main job, minister attacks EU jobs madness. He says this is Chris Grayling accusing officials of not living in the real world in a row over data laws. The Observer this morning, talking of data, ministers forced to reveal British link to the US data spying scandal. We'll be talking to the Foreign Secretary William Hague about that later in the programme, and a great picture there of Serena Williams winning the French Open final. The Independent, their front page, will the money pledged at this table reach his table? They asked. This is the G8 food summit that was in London yesterday. Thousands of people turning out for that. The Mail talk about Prince Harry, a story there about a gay soldier who has told how Prince Harry bravely rescued him, they say, from a terrifying homophobic attack by squaddies from a rival regiment. The Sunday Express, cancer risk of 2 beers a year is their main story, and then The Sun and the Sunday Mirror going on what they call the Eggs Factor. This is Britain's Got Talent, of course, last night. Simon Cowell finding himself covered in eggs. Now, with me to join the papers are Sheila Hancock and Tim Montgomery. And Sheila, let's start with you. What would you like to talk about?
Well, it is a delight being on this programme because you read all the papers very quickly, and I just am so amazed at how lucky we are with the British press, and particularly the Sundays, because they try and tell me about things I don't know about. I'm fascinated by this new Sunday Sun, which I've not seen before, which seems to be an advert for underwear. There's lots of ladies with very odd boobs all the way through, wearing rather old-fashioned knickers and things. However, the main story that I'm grateful for is this whole thing of the Silicon Valley getting our data and everything. There's a very good article in the Independent by Rupert Cornwell looking at this whole thing of privacy. The whole attitude to privacy seems to me to have changed. I mean, does anybody care anymore? You know, children are twittering and putting themselves on Facebook, but nobody seems to mind people knowing about their lives. There's a bit at the end where it says, once upon a time, people read books and wrote letters, and spies talked to each other on park benches. Maybe such ancient habits weren't so bad after all.
Days, letters. I mean, how often do you receive letters nowadays? But it's all happened so quickly, hasn't it?
It has.
You know, Facebook, Twitter, people putting lots and lots of information about themselves.
But that's why, before we get our knickers in a twist about privacy, I think we should examine what the younger generation think about privacy anymore. I suspect that when I'm dead and gone, people won't give a damn whether people are looking at their emails or not, however extreme they may be.
There's a cartoon, actually, a very good cartoon in the Sunday Telegraph from Adams, and he compares what spying was to what it now is. And in the past, there you have the guy on the park bench looking at us through his newspaper, but actually today it's the desktop, the computer in our own homes is supposedly the spy on us, as But
it is interesting, isn't it? And the dangers. I mean, it's all happened so quickly. I mean, you've got porn, extreme porn available, and privacy, these sort of things depend on our morality and our attitude, and there is always going to be people that abuse it. That's the worrying thing. And I don't know where the lines have got to be drawn
there's one
anymore.
thing, there's privacy, isn't there, just about your private emails and things like that, and then there's the other argument that this is, a fight against terror, and it's where you draw the line.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably a lot of people watching this programme now would like government to be on top of these security threats, and I think the key thing is not whether government is inspecting these communications, it's whether it's approved and whether it's monitored. I think what frightens people is the idea that the security services are somehow acting beyond the law, that they're not subject to oversight by
People
Senate.
don't mind if their private emails, their Skype conversations are being looked at, Facebook exchanges.
I think some clearly do, but I should think the bulk of people, as long as it's subject to democratic oversight, want our security services to be looking at the people who potentially threaten our security.
But do we trust the oversight people? That's the trouble.
These are a balance of risks, but I think most people would be more worried that our government and our authorities weren't examining the threats to us than actually they were taking a very permissive and liberal attitude.
Let's just move on to the story you've got there, which is about what we were talking about. I was just talking about earlier. This is David Cameron saying that he wants more action on online porn. That's something that is incredibly accessible now to everybody, really.
Well, this is a subject I know you've covered, Sophie, before for the BBC, but I think in terms of things that actually worry parents and worry the public, the access that children now have to extraordinary, crude, ugly images on their mobile phones, on the computers that they have in their bedrooms now. This is what worries parents, and parents are often less able to understand how to filter this information than their children.
Yeah. But I don't want parents seeing it either. I don't want anybody. I don't want these awful perverts to be given a platform.
Well, I agree with you. And some of the worst forms of this pornography, especially, of course, images of children, should absolutely be outlawed. And I think the challenge that David Cameron, Claire Perry, a campaigning Conservative MP, are making is actually these internet firms, Google, etc., are incredibly libertarian in their attitudes to these things. They're not willing to control any of these images that people can access at a click of a button.
And people want to know why,
force them to be much more responsible.
And a lot of parents want to know why they can't just turn it off. Why can't you opt in rather than just have it free?
But then you raise the whole question of censorship. When I was young, we had heavy censorship, and that was awful. And we rejoiced when it was abolished, but we never imagined that it was going to lead to this kind of extremity.
Now let's talk about
it has got out of control.
Let's talk about another story you've picked up here.
This is a woman who's writing about her mother who has dementia and is terribly ill and has been for years and years. And she tried to commit suicide and she was resuscitated at the hospital. And it's opening up again this question of whether you have the right to die, and also saying that you should talk about your death. I mean, I'm getting to the age now where I am preparing for death. I'm not in a kind of morbid way, but
you've never been more alive.
I'm trying to
You're 80 now, aren't you? I can't believe you're 80.
And I want to tidy things up so my kids don't have a mess when I leave. And I want them to know, if I go dotty, which I'm on the verge of doing, I want them to know where I want to go or how I want to be cared for. Do you know what I mean? And I think they're things that we should discuss. And I think as a society, we should be discussing. I think a lot of the taboos on the idea of assisted dying have gone. People are not as deeply religious as they used to be. Their attitudes towards death have changed, and society just hasn't moved with it.
But then you say, I want to talk about death, I'm preparing about death, and everyone goes, ooh, because we're not used to talking about it.
That's why I say things like that, because I don't want them to be like that. We're all going to die. We've got two old guys who are looking death in the face this week. We've got Mandela and we've got Prince Philip. And we're all looking death in the face. So the more we talk about it so that people die well, the better.
Your children, I'm sure, would behave entirely properly. The reason why I'm slightly worried about a right to die is for some people it becomes a duty to die. Some people do not have good children who think about inheriting the home, etc. And keeping the law more or less as it is gives them an absolute protection that society will always.
This is a debate we can keep having and keep having. Another time. We'll get you back for that one. Let's move on to that. There is your story there, Tim, which is obviously about Mandela, who is, we know, in a serious situation, though stable this morning, we're told.
Yes, well, it seems to be yesterday, I think we all woke up to the fear that actually Mandela was at death's door, and perhaps he still might be. But this story in the Sunday Telegraph today really does remind us how frail he is now. At Christmas he spent 3 weeks in hospital because of this lung infection. A couple of months ago he was in hospital for 10 days. The story talks about how actually when he's with his friends and family now, he doesn't even want to converse a lot of the time. He's clearly a man who is aging now and is very frail, and as President Zuma said yesterday, we should all be praying for his health and his family.
Well, his health, I think it's a bit of a lost cause, surely.
Maybe it is.
He's dying.
Yeah, he is dying. He is
There's
dying.
nothing wrong with that.
But
He's
it seems
dying.
actually, when you just listen to the response from South Africa at the moment, it seems people are more prepared than they were even just, let's say,
They
a few
seem to
months
be
ago.
more open now. Previously, they haven't used the word serious, and now the South African authorities do seem to be preparing us that it may not be long now before he slips away.
And Sheila, your next story?
Well, just Prince Philip. it's been a week, hasn't it, for the poor Queen? And I just thought it was lovely when she came yesterday, and when she said he's not ill. You know, I mean, I don't know the Queen. None of us know the Queen. We only know the press version of it. But was she saying he's not ill because she doesn't want to think he's ill? And one can't help thinking that he has been the most enormous support to her. I think if only for a good laugh. I mean, this is a really good profile of him. He's not dead yet, bless him. Yeah, it's great. And there's a bit where one of the things, he's always putting his foot in it. And he said, and there was somebody, she asked a blind army hero how much sight he had. Not a lot, he said, judging by the tie he's wearing. And I mean, for somebody who has to be so solemn, the poor Queen, she has to do ceremonies and be nice and shake hands, to go home to a guy who puts his foot in the whole time must be such a relief to her. And I think, I hope he's going to be all right for her sake.
Absolutely. Tim, let's talk about the next story there, which is about the events yesterday in Hyde Park.
Yes, 45,000 people came together for a rally against world hunger, and we knock ourselves as a nation a lot, don't we? We're a self-deprecating kind, but we have here Bill Gates, from an American, saying actually Britain should be incredibly proud of the role that we play in fighting world hunger. Now, not everybody agrees with every aspect of the aid budget, but most people do think tackling hunger, providing vaccinations for children in the poorest parts of the world from diseases like malaria. Britain is a world leader at this. Even at a time of austerity, when budgets are tight, we have actually found the money to meet the 0.7% target of our national income.
And there was a big rally, which is hardly covered by most of the
No,
papers.
but it's in the Observer. But
And front page of the Independent.
Interestingly, Sophie, I think the aid budget and gay marriage are probably two of the issues that cause David Cameron some of the biggest problems he has with his backbenchers. And actually, I think a lot of the things that this government does will be forgotten. But actually, when David Cameron retires from politics, I think what he's done for the world's poorest and in introducing gay marriage, he'll be very proud of. But there's an article here in the Mail on Sunday. Another Tory MP, Andrew Bridgen, has gone on the record to say it's time for David Cameron to go. And the problem for David Cameron is some of these issues that may be historically significant are some of the reasons why he is unpopular with a lot of
Do you think that's
his
serious,
MPs.
though? I mean, he's the second, isn't he, to go on the record?
I think David Cameron is certainly safe for now, and there's no one really else in Parliament, in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, who could lead the Conservative Party more successfully at the next general election. So he's safe. His point of vulnerability comes in about a year after the European elections, which I think UKIP may do incredibly well in. If the Tories look like they aren't doing very well in the opinion polls, then there could be a push against his leadership. But Labour's opinion poll for mid-stage of a parliament is actually quite modest. So I think David Cameron will remain competitive,
I think
and he'll lead the Tories into the next election.
I think you're right that he should be commended for having the courage to stand up to the right wing of his party on these issues. I really do.
And Sheila, your final story this morning.
Oh, gosh. Well, this is about...
Take the pick.
Well, it's either the fact that they're going to stop people going in the slow lane all the time.
Middle lane, that's right.
Putin. This thing about Putin, his wife, he's ditching his wife. It just comes up again with this odd man. Here we have this world leader who goes around having photos of him wrestling with bears and sliding. Isn't everybody worried about it? I'm really
There's an
worried.
appetite for it there in Russia. I think the
No,
Russian...
but I'm worried that he's in a position of power and he's obviously total diddler.
Well, it's worse than odd. If you look at so many of the problems in the world, whether it's Syria or so many of the oppression of human rights in his own country,
Absolutely.
Russia is becoming a real problem again. It's
And
a
we're
block
not
to
worrying
huge.
enough. We're not
We're not worried enough, no.
Well, on that note, I shall have to leave it there.